Hi guys. Today I want to talk about a topic that I think has been on everyone's minds, especially recently, and that's the topic of impact. Of impact created by either one person or a collective of people. How can we create an impact or make any sort of change in terms of anything that's happening in the world right now? But what if I told you that there is another way of ending the conflict in the world, of ending the energy that fuels war in the world? One that doesn't require us to go out there and protest, to get angry, or to actually go to the war zones and try to help, which let's be realistic, pretty much the majority of us are not able to do that. By weaving together insights from psychology, neuroscience, and spiritual philosophy, in this episode, I'm going to look at how the act of creation metabolizes the destructive energy of war, of conflict, of ruin, and how we can use it in our own lives to actually create any impact in the world. Hi guys, welcome to my podcast, Bridging the Realm. I'm Desislava, and this is where I explore how the world really works from the quantum and spiritual lens in order to bridge the gap between the seen and the unseen so that we can understand the full picture of our reality. Before I get into any of the research, I really want to start off and set the foundation from the beginning in terms of the lens from which I'm coming into this argument from. And it's a well-known universal truth that there is a non-physical reality or aspect to the physical reality. So we have the physical reality, which is everything we can experience with the five senses: see, hear, touch, smell. And this is something that has been kind of dominating our reality in terms of the Newtonian way of seeing the world, which is the belief that there's only this physical reality and nothing else outside of it. However, it's a well-known universal truth by now that there is a non-physical spiritual dimension and aspect to our physical reality, and these two are parallel. So the way you can think of it is it's kind of like we have the energetic blueprint of everything that is happening, everything that we see in the world today. There is already an energetic blueprint that exists on the energy level. And then once this has enough momentum in terms of energy, it manifests into the physical reality. So this is the lens from which I want to frame this whole episode today. So that's very important to set from the beginning. You see, when we think about war, we immediately jump to the conclusion that the only way to stop war is through peace. So we have war on one end of the scale and peace on the other end of the scale. They normally always go hand in hand in terms of the two opposites. How can you stop one? It's by being the other. However, peace is a passive state and war is an active state. So you can't stop an active state through being in a passive state. You need something else to replace the energy that is already activated. So if we think about it from that notion, then peace is not the opposite to war. What is opposite to war is creation. So the true remedy of conflict and ruin is not a passive state of peace, but it's the active and expansive power of creation. So let's start with looking at peace. Peace in its passive form is the absence of war. But nature doesn't do absence, nature does replacement. So when you pull a weed, another one grows back in its place. So in order for war to be replaced, something else, another active energy needs to come in and to redirect the force of war, redirect it in a different place. When you end the Cold War, an identity crisis starts. When a society stops fighting an outside enemy, it starts to turn inwards. Why is that? That's because the actual underlying energy of the conflict hasn't been transmuted, it hasn't been transformed, it's just been suppressed. So if peace doesn't transmute the energy, then what actually transmutes the energy? Let's look at what the evidence actually says about what transmutes war energy. The first example is a neuroscience piece of research called Free Your Mind, which took place in Israel. Now, researchers in Israel explored how creative thinking serves as cognitive tool to diminish intergroup conflicts and entrenched social biases. By synthesizing neurological and psychological data, the researchers concluded that the cognitive flexibility and originality enable people to adopt new perspectives and break away from the rigid and automatic prejudices. And the creativity is an effective pathway towards global reconciliation and peace. In other words, when we're in a genuinely creative state, the brain is biologically incapable of maintaining the us versus them dynamic. It literally shuts down the part of the brain that goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode. which is probably why so many teachings are now, especially in the recent years, have been telling us of the importance of being able to regulate our nervous system in order to be able to get creative, in order to be able to be in a peaceful state. So first, you have to actually shut down that part of the brain in order to be able to create, and vice versa. If we're in a creative state, we're not able to go into the fight or flight mode because they're literally like the opposite ends of the scale. So according to the neuroscience, creativity on a neurological level is the antidote of war or warlike mentality. And I have to say, this whole episode was inspired by me attempting to create something of my own project, my own creation that comes from my own ideas and research. And it was pretty fascinating to see for myself just how much that energy of creativity can really expand your state of being and just exponentially open your mind to so many different ideas and so many different perspectives. And this is not a metaphor, it was measurable brain function, and it was studied in one of the biggest conflict areas in the world. So, creativity is the antidote to war. So, that's the first piece of research. Next piece of research also deals with conflict areas, and this time in Nazi Germany. So, Viktor Frankl survived 4 Nazi concentration camps and emerged with one of the most powerful psychological frameworks of the 20th century. And his observation was pretty mind-blowing. He observed that the prisoners who survived the concentration camps psychologically were not necessarily the ones that had least amount of suffering, but they were the ones who retained a reason to keep going, finding a meaning, a purpose to live. So Frankl identified 3 main pathways through which people could achieve that. The first and the primary one was being the creative value, meaning that they discovered through creating a work or doing a deed. Without any meaning, he observed what he called a mass neurotic triad: aggression, depression, and addiction. Destruction, in other words, is what fills the vacuum that purposeless living leaves behind. Frankl didn't just theorize this from his office, he was right there in the conflict himself. He survived 4 concentration camps and managed to come out of them being able to see what actually kept people going and what actually kept them sane. So creativity was the big major way in which many people were able to not just survive the conflict, but survive it psychologically. So ultimately, the human capacity of making meaning, of creating a meaning out of something, is not just a luxury. It is literally some people's way of surviving some of the most traumatic experiences in life. And again, we have this aspect of creation, of using creation, using your imagination. As I was doing research for this topic and watching some interviews with Frankl describing this theory, how he came about with it, there was one moment that particularly stuck with me, where he describes a moment in which him and his friends and family were in the concentration camps, and there was this one moment when the sun was going down and they were all just sitting there, just watching the sunset, just watching the sun go down. And he describes it as this moment where it's almost as if they were able to forget about everything else that existed right there and then, and they were able to just fully be in that moment of being in that sun. And even just recalling the story that he retold, it brings up these emotions, because it's such a powerful way of being able to use our creative imagination and just being present, being in the moment. So again, this is such a powerful way that we can see how creativity can be used as a way to give us meaning and purpose, and ultimately a way to survive. Another piece of research that I want to bring your attention to, which shows very clearly how the act of positive states and creative states can end states of conflict and war, is a psychological piece of research by Barbara Fredrickson in 1988. Simply asked the question, what do positive emotions actually do and what are they for? Psychology has spent over a century exploring what negative states and emotions do. So what happens during crisis or trauma and how that leads to our nervous system shutting down, going into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode. But there hasn't been a lot of research done into what positive states actually do, not just for us, but also for the mind and the body and for our emotions. So this piece of research is really key in terms of understanding how the positive energy and emotions behind creativity and being creative can have a huge effect on the negative states and what actually happens within our psychology. So this psychological research discovered that positive emotions, on the other hand, can actually do the opposite to what negative does. They broaden what we think, what we can feel, do, and literally expand the neural repertoire available to us. So joy sparks play, interest sparks exploration, love generates curiosity, creativity, and connection. What this research also found, which is the most crucial part of this, is that positive states don't just coexist with negative ones, they actually completely undo them. At the neurological level, positive emotional states physically reverse the physiological effects of stress and fear. So Barbara Fredrickson called this the undoing effect. So she identified this as an upward spiral. Positive emotions build resources, psychological, social, physical, that outlast the emotion itself, generating more resilience and more capacity for creative action over time. So this psychological research discovered that positive emotions do the opposite to what negative emotions do. So positive emotions broaden our perspective, allow us to feel more, do more, think in a bigger way. They basically undo what the negative emotions do, which is to constrict and to narrow our way of thinking, of viewing the world. So the positive emotions do exactly the opposite. They expand our ability to see the world from a completely different perspective or different perspectives. So ultimately, what this piece of research is saying is that we can't really think our way out of a fear-based world from a fear-based mind. In order to go into a positive state or feel any sort of positive emotions and be in positive states, we have to change completely the neural state that we're in. And I have to say, this whole episode was inspired by me attempting to create something of my own project, my own creation that comes from my own ideas and research. And it was pretty fascinating to see for myself just how much that energy of creativity can really expand your state of being and just exponentially open your mind to so many different ideas and so many different perspectives. The brain in survival mode is brilliant at one thing, surviving. But creation requires a different neural state entirely, and the gateway to that state is positive emotion, real, embodied, purposeful engagement with life. So when we're creating a beautiful piece of art or music or poetry or a community or an event, we're literally generating a neurological state that has the documented scientific capacity to undo the state that makes war possible. So being in the act of creation undoes the energy and act of war. I'm sure that by now you can all see the pattern that runs through everything that we've just covered. Destruction is a contracted state. Neurologically, it narrows thinking, it activates tribalism, it feeds itself into a downward spiral where fear breeds more fear and activates more fear and more anger and more negative emotions. And peace as a passive neutrality is simply the exhaustion of that contraction. It's the absence of narrowing, but it is not yet the presence of something new. Creation, on the other hand, is an expansive state. It's an upward spiral. It literally rewires the brain. It dissolves in-group, out-of-group biases. It generates meaning. It produces an upward spiral that builds resources for generations. The antidote to war isn't the ceasing of fire. It's the igniting of purpose. Before I talk about the final piece of research, which is going to completely blow your minds away, I want to step back a little bit and kind of go back to the aspect of the physical and non-physical reality, because of course we are on bridging realms. So as you know, I like to bridge the gap between the physical and the non-physical reality. But if we go back a little bit and just think about that concept for a while, and the idea that we have this physical reality where everything that we can see, hear, and touch is something that is already manifested from this non-physical reality. So first we have the non-physical, which is the blueprint, the energetic blueprint of everything that exists in the physical reality. Then following on that narrative, we can say that reality is not really set in place until we actually think about it first. So everything that is happening in this physical reality is the result of all of our past thoughts, emotions, ideas, perspectives that have come together into this one big physical reality. But before this one big physical reality existed, it was first a thought. It was first just an energetic potential of what could be possible. So looking at it from that perspective, I think it's really important to again go back to that idea that it is really through our mind that we are creating what we're seeing in the world right here, right now, today, in our present moment. So if we think about that, I think it's very important to kind of sit with that and just really try to understand it, and not just with our minds, but within our bodies. Because once you really get this idea, get this concept with your full body, it's almost like there's this remembrance, like we're remembering that we are actually all here together co-creating this. And if we're here together and co-creating this reality, then of course we have some way of changing what is happening right now, some way of changing or rerouting the direction in which this physical manifestation that came from our thoughts is now manifesting. So that's definitely a concept to sit with, and we can talk about this all day, but I really urge you to sit with that for a while and just try to see how that feels and lands within your own body. Because once you can understand it and once you can experience it through your own reality and see how in your own life right now, you have manifested, or right now you're seeing things that were once, long time ago, were just thoughts in your mind, were just ideas in your head. And now they're here, they're physical, you can experience them, you can feel them and touch them. I think that's a pretty expansive way of seeing the world, and pretty expansive way of just having this perspective on the world. And it's definitely something that I've sat with and try to really see within myself how that lands in my own life, how that has landed, how I have created things that were once just thoughts and ideas and emotions within my being and are now physically manifested, whether that's positive things or negative things. So yeah, just to keep that in mind, because this next piece of research is going to bring that to a whole nother level. Now, this last piece of research is going to synthesize everything that we've spoken about and add the cherry on top. So, Dr. David Hawkins was a psychiatrist, a researcher, and a mystic. And for 20 years, he conducted more than 250,000 calibrations of human consciousness using kinesiology, also known as muscle testing, to create what he called the map of consciousness, a logarithmic scale from 1 to 1000 that maps every human emotion and energetic state. And what this map reveals about war, peace, and creation is, in my view, the most important piece of information you ever hear. So he was able to divide the different emotional states that a human can have into different sections with different states and different levels of frequency that each one has. So anger, or force, that requires force, was at the level 150. So this was, of course, anger is the emotional fuel of war, violence, retribution, feels powerful but is ultimately draining and is self-defeating. Then we have courage, which sits at level 200, and that's the threshold. So this is the critical line between the force and the power. This is where integrity begins and where creation becomes possible. At 310 to 400, we have willingness and reason, where purposeful creations begins and actions aligned with values, the level of innovation, of contribution, of putting something meaningful out into the world. Sitting at level 500, we have love, the frequency of love, which is unconditional, self-sustaining, and this is the level of the great creative forces in the human history. The artists, the healers, the visionaries, these all resonate at this level of 500. And then at the very top we have the state of peace, which is the energy of true creation, which is the energy of the mystic, the realized creator. However, in order to get to that level of peace, we have to go through all the other levels that are underneath it, which means we have to go through the willingness, the reason, the love, the joy, and then ultimately peace. So the only road that leads up to that is the road through creation, because it's through creation that we're able to experience love, joy, an expansive energy that that gets us on this upward spiral so that we're able to reach the top. However, we can't reach the top without reaching any of the levels below. So first we have to start with where we're really at. So where are you really at? Because the scale is logarithmic, not linear, the difference between levels is not 10 or 100 times, it is exponential. So Hawkins found that one person at level 300, which is the level of optimism and non-judgment, counterbalances 90,000 people below the level 200. So that means they counterbalance 90,000 people who are at the level of fear, of hatred, of anger. Then one person at level 500, which is the level of love, counterbalances 750,000 people below 200. And then it gets even wilder. One person at level 600, which is peace, counterbalances 10 million people below 200. One person at level 700. How about you guess how many people that counterbalances? Do you ever think? You're probably not even close. One person at 700 counterbalances 70 million people below 200. That's right, guys. I want you to really feel what this means, because this is not poetry, this is not a metaphor, it's not spiritual woohoo. This is a mathematical structure that measures the level of consciousness that has been done by psychiatrists for over 2 decades. So it's not something that we can just push away as something that's spiritual woohoo, or it's just a metaphor, or it's just a theory. This is proven science, and we can't question it, or can we? And what that means for you or me is that the most potent thing that we can do, the most powerful shift that we can do from ourselves, from our own being, is to raise our consciousness through the act of creation. Not peace, not being in a passive state, but through the act of creation. Now, let me just stop there and, as a caveat, say that this is not, I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing. I'm not talking about just completely shutting what we don't want to be part of our world and focusing only on what we want to create, and ignoring the fact that there's currently war going on in our world and there are other terrible things going on in our world. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, can we hold these two energies together? And can we, within being in that space in the middle, can we then choose, really consciously choose to redirect our energy? Can we create something that's truly meaningful, something that operates from a place of love and abundance and activation and inspiration and expansion? So not because we're trying to ignore, as I mentioned, the darkness and what's going on in the world right now, but simply because the energy of creation is fully capable of destroying the energy that is needed to go into war, the energy that is needed that is fueling the war right now. So the energy of creation outweighs the energy of destruction. So can we hold both of these in balance within our hands and decide, really consciously decide, where we choose to put our energy? Because let's face it, the old systems are falling, the old systems are crumbling, and there is a lot of pain and suffering with that, yes. And of course we have to acknowledge that. We can't deny it. But the old systems are falling, and in order for us to transition into this brand new reality that so many people are talking about, we have to create the new structures for it. We have to be the ones that actually create the very first foundation of this brand new reality that we want to go into. Otherwise, we're left with nothing. We're left with a crumbling structure, with a crumbling system that is going nowhere, and is just going into this downward spiral of more and more war and more conflict and destruction. So in order to shift away from that, in order to take the energy from this to this, we have to give it structure. We have to give it energy in order to create this brand new foundation, this brand new energetic blueprint that we need in order to create anything in the world. So really ask yourselves, what are you here to create? What is yours to create right now in this lifetime that is calling you right now? What would you be making, building, sharing, healing if you trusted that it mattered? What is the one thing that you keep postponing that you know, and you've received so much evidence for it, that you need to just do it, that you need to just take the first step, take the big leap, and not necessarily leave your current life behind or take a huge leap to the point where there's just not going back, but at least take the first step, at least make that first move that gets that momentum going, that gets you on that upward spiral. Because once you take the first step, it becomes so much easier to take the next step and the next step and the next step, because again, we get into this upward spiral that is just becoming easier and easier, lighter and lighter to go up the scale. So stop waiting for the world to become safer in order for you to create first, and then the environment, the world will follow. Okay, guys, and as we're speaking about creation in the spirit of walking the walk as well as talking the talk, I myself have been one to really practice what I preach, and I have been in the process of finally being able to release some of my own creations that I have been working on, some for years, others for just several months. But nonetheless, I really want to let you know about them because I feel that they will be of great benefit to some of you. And if you are interested, feel free to reach out to me if this is something you feel that you'll be able to get any value from. So the first one, and as I mentioned previously, is a course that I've created that is called Aura Reset. Aura Reset is a course I created on clearing and maintaining your biofield. If the aura is not regularly cleared and maintained and protected, then it starts to carry the weight of, quite literally, the weight of the world around us, because we're constantly absorbing energies from the people who we're with, from the places that we go to, from the world around us, and generally just from everything that's happening in the world. Everything that we are able to energetically intake, whether it's through a screen or a person or a place, we absorb that into our field. And unless we regularly are able to clear these energies and release them from our field and regenerate our field again, then it becomes very, very difficult for us to live in a healthy and in a uplifting way. It becomes very heavy because we're literally having to carry the weight of the energies that we've absorbed from around us. So again, this is a course that is absolutely vital for anyone who is sensitive, who feels energies, who feels like they absorb a lot of energies from places that they go, from people that they meet. And again, as someone who is extremely sensitive, I know just how much of a difference it could make to your life. So guys, if you're interested in trying it out, definitely get in touch with me. I'll be launching the first cohort very, very soon. So the second creation is one for all of my astrology geeks and people who just love to explore more about their soul chart. Soul Blueprint is actually a personalized report, a personalized reading created by me, which includes not one, not two, but 15 different systems that come into one. 15 different systems that are synthesized into one big narrative that is the story of who you are from a soul perspective. This includes everything from Western astrology to human design to numerology in a way that is just the most incredible piece of story that is about you and about who you are and your life here and what you came here to do. So if you're someone who's lost in terms of you're still unsure of what your purpose might be and what you're here to do, this is probably one of the best things that you can possibly try. And again, this is in the very early stages of launch. So if you're interested in having a personalized report done by me, then definitely get in touch through the link in the description. And finally, for my final creation that I wish to share with you, those of you who have been with me from the very beginning of this podcast of Bridging the Realm, you probably know me through a lot of the work that I've done from the beginning, which was about exploring life after death, what the soul is, what consciousness is, near-death experiences, where I've interviewed some incredible people, teachers, spiritual teachers who are in the field of psychic mediumship, of clairvoyance, of communicating with the afterlife. Really happy to say that we have launched the documentary series, which I've been working on for a couple of years now, which are called the Soul Rescuers series, which is an educational series that explores what happens in life after death, ancestral healing, what the soul is, and what the spirit world is like. It is actually based on the life and work of my first two spiritual teachers, who are the very first people who introduced me into this world of beyond the veil, of life after death, of the spiritual world and what it actually is. And the documentary series is based around their life and work of what it is like to actually be able to communicate with the other side, what their stories are from when they were young, of being born as clairvoyants and clairsentients and being able to communicate quite literally with the spirits of their deceased loved ones. And it's an amazing, amazing documentary series. And not only is it available for you to watch, but also we have started to do a monthly event where we screen one episode from the series every single month for free. It's a free event, and you get a chance to ask questions directly to the main speakers of the documentary series, to my teachers who will be at the Q&A session with you for you to ask questions directly. So I really hope that you guys can join me either for the event, or if you wish to purchase the series, that's also available through the link below. But these are my three creations. If you managed to stay until the very end, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for really giving me your time and your attention to be here with me. Wow, I share yet another creation of my own, another idea, along with some of these creations that are really my way of making a difference, my way of making a change in the best way that I can from where I am right now. So guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.